Hi, good morning. Today we're going to talk about something called the Crusades. So last time you heard me talk, I talked about Muhammad. The Crusades are really a response to the life of Muhammad and the subsequent victories that Muslim armies won across the Middle East and North Africa and even into Europe. Okay, so you've heard of these, I'm sure. Here we go. Let's talk about it. Okay, try to keep up. You should write this down. Here we go. The Crusades are basically a military operation conducted by the Roman Catholic Church. Here, where is that? I'll show you the same map again. Okay. Remember that. Okay. You have Roman Catholics from here. Okay. You've got Eastern Orthodox Christians really here. Okay, and then you have the rise of Islam. So Islam, if I was to sort of fill this in, I would fill all of this in like so, like this, like this, like this, and even into Spain. And they attempted, of course, to attack into Gaul. So you can see that the Muslim empire, if you will, has grown. Now the key point here I should point out is, guess what city is going to fall into Muslim hands? Well, it's the holy city of Jerusalem, the most important city in Christianity, because of course that is the place where Jesus Christ was put to death. So that is the most important city for Christians, whether it be Eastern Orthodox Christians or it be Roman Catholics. This is the most important city. So this is going to be a response to the Crusades, are going to be a response to the fact that the Muslims have taken Jerusalem. That's the main thing we need to keep in mind here. So we call this area the Holy Lands, correct? You've heard that term before. This is a Christian term. It's a Muslim term as well. The Holy Lands, which had been controlled by Christians for, basically, you could make the argument about 300 years, lose control when the Muslims come along in the mid-600s. And of course, the main target is going to be the city of Jerusalem. That is going to be the main target to get that back. All right. So how does this go down? Well, we're going to talk about a pope who starts it. Okay. So the man's name is Pope Urban II, and this happens in 1095, where he gets a message from the leader of the. He basically gets a request. And he gets a request from the leader of the Eastern Orthodox Church. I hope you recall that the Eastern Orthodox Church, Church is a part of the Byzantine Empire. Remember this business down here? Okay. See where it says Byzantine Empire? The Eastern Roman Empire changes its name after the Western Roman Empire falls. Okay. So this is an attempt by the Byzantines, shall I say, and the Eastern Orthodox Christians to get some help, because they're the ones who are really dealing with the Muslims the most, because the Muslims are coming out of, you can see in that map how the Byzantines, the Eastern Orthodox Christians were in Greece, and they were in Turkey, and they were in the Middle East, and those types of things, and they need help. And so many Christians saw this, the Crusades, as an attempt. Pope Urban, certainly, I think Pope Urban, without a doubt, saw this as an attempt to reunify Christianity. That was one of the main goals. Okay, so the Pope is going to get a bunch of Roman Catholics to go to. Okay, he's going to get a bunch of Roman Catholics to go to the Middle East to help the Eastern Orthodox Christians, and the desire here is that they will be helping each other. Okay, so now how do you, as a Pope, get a bunch of European Roman Catholics to do this? How do you form an army? How are you going to create an army to go and help in the Middle East? Well, the Pope had to make promises. They're going to fight as the Holy Roman Empire. Certainly you remember that from Charlemagne. Okay, so what things can you promise a young European guy to get him to go? Well, you can promise him, what can a pope give? Forgiveness of sins. Now, I don't know how many of you are Catholics, but Catholics are supposed to go to confession once or twice a year, where they ask for forgiveness, ask God for forgiveness of their sins. And so you've seen stuff on movies where you go into that little box and there's a screen and the priest is on one side and the person's on the other and they confess their sins. Okay, so basically what the Pope says is he says, okay, all your sins are forgiven so far, that you've done so far. And really the deal was all your sins going forward are forgiven as well. Okay? The next thing is freedom from debts. Okay, so if you owed money to the Roman Catholic Church and you volunteered to go on a crusade, your debts are paid. Now, unfortunately, these two things really brought out not necessarily always the best quality of person. It brought out sinners and deadbeats. Okay? So how do you get a little bit better class of person? You invite, you basically tell people that, you tell young men, you say you get choice of lands in the conquered area. In other words, whatever we conquer, we're going to give some of that land to you. And I would argue that this is very important. This is the one thing that gets most young men to go, young European men to go, especially little brothers. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, what I mean by this is that during the Middle Ages, there was no such thing as a last will and testament. In other words, a guy didn't write a will and say, I want so much of my wealth to go to one son, and then this much of my wealth to go to my other son, and this much of my wealth to go to my daughter, etc. Everything that a man owned, his land, his possessions, even his shield, his coat of arms, went to the oldest son, just went straight to the oldest son. Even though there was a daughter who was older, it went straight to the oldest son. And basically little brothers had to live off of their older brothers. So now, what are we saying here? We're saying here's a chance for a little brother to have a life of his own, to make his own way, to have his own land, to make a life for himself. That's why it's popular with second sons. We call these guys crusaders. We sort of use that term more in modern times than they did in Middle Ages time period. A crusader means marked with a cross. And basically what happened was that a guy basically had to pay for everything himself. He had to bring his own weapons, he had to bring his own armor, he had to bring his own horse. And he got to Italy where he got a ride. The Roman Catholic Church basically paid for a boat ride to the Middle East. But he also, a crusader would also in many cases get a tunic, a white tunic that had a big red cross on it. And so this big tunic was a sheet about maybe 8-9 feet long with a hole in the middle of it, and you put your head through the hole, and on one side was a cross. And so you wore the cross on your chest when you were going to a crusade, you flipped it around and wore the cross on your back when you were coming home. Okay? And look, there were about 9 crusades altogether, and we sort of think about it in those sort of ways. Look, serfs to kings went. Remember the feudal pyramid? Okay? Serfs to kings went. Okay? What is the importance of the Crusades? Well, we should judge a military operation on whether they achieve the intended military target, and therefore I would call these semi-successful. These military expeditions were only semi-successful. Did they, the intended goal was to kick the Muslims out of the Middle East and reclaim the Holy Lands for Christianity. Obviously, that was not what happened because we know that Muslims still dominate the Middle East today. Did Christians get access to their former sites? Yes, they did. They got access to Jerusalem. That is the situation today. So there are Christians in Jerusalem. There are lots of Christians in Jerusalem today, and they can go to the sacred sites there. Bethlehem, of course, is one of these cities as well. These are the types. So that is what I would I'm going to call it semi-successful. I want to make sure that it is noted that crusaders were not necessarily always very nice. How's that sound? And sometimes they were prone to vandalism, certainly towards Muslims, but also against Jews, because of the long-running belief of many Christians, which is really not true, is that Jews killed Jesus. The Romans killed Jesus. The Jews did not, but this has been an excuse, and even Hitler used this as an excuse, even though Hitler was no Christian, for killing and doing things to Jews. So now this is not good. This causes other religions to be distrustworthy of Christians, and this has been a black eye to Christianity ever since the Crusades. And this is one of the things that Muslims today use as still a discussion against Christianity. Again, I would sort of argue that what did Muhammad's armies do as they crossed North Africa, for example? So these types of things are done by all groups of invaders. Okay? Now, have you ever gone on vacation? Have you ever picked up some souvenirs from the place where you go? Because that place has those things, where you live does not. Well, that's what these Crusaders did. And this is number 3, is the most important one, I would say, of all. And that is that the Crusaders came home with cool new stuff. They brought stuff home with them. And for example, one of the best examples I can give you is spices. Crusaders brought spices back home with them to Europe. And Europeans all across the continent of Europe were like, oh my God, this is great. This is so excellent. I don't want to have to go on a crusade, however, to get some more spice. So what does this do? This re-stimulates trade after the fall of Rome. One of the things is a little hard in this format for me to emphasize to you is that feudalism is a system that restricts trade. Feudalism is a vertical system. You remember the feudal pyramid? Things go up and down. There's very little trade between kingdoms. And so when trade slows down, culture slows down because the movement of people and ideas slows down. So now suddenly what have we got? We got all these guys coming from the Middle East back to Europe. What are they bringing with them? They're bringing with them interesting things. Spices being my example, there was lots of things. And Europeans want those things once they are exposed to them. And now somebody over here says, well, gee whiz, I bet I can make a lot of money if I could be the person who could be the go-between to do these things. Okay? All right, so draw a line, and I'll just sort of tell you some brief parts of this. The Christians will sack Jerusalem in 1099. So you can see, if you look back up at the top, 1095 is when this starts. The first crusade actually kicks the Muslims out of Jerusalem by 1099, and it was a bloody mess. I can tell you that. So the Muslims are not going to stand idly by. They're going to try to take Jerusalem back. It takes them a while. Their general that they pick is a man named Saladin, and he retakes Jerusalem in 1187. Those of you who've seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven in, I believe, your global studies class, that's what the movie is about. The movie is about the Christians' attempt to defend Jerusalem from Saladin. Okay? Now this is going to start the Third Crusade, and the Third Crusade is the most famous one because there is a king from Europe who goes on this one. And the king from Europe is the King of England. And the King of England, his name was Richard. And Richard had a unique and very interesting name. His nickname was Richard the Lionhearted. And Richard is the most famous person from Europe to go on a crusade. And Richard's return to England after his crusade spawns the legend of Robin Hood. Supposedly Robin Hood was one of Richard the Lionhearted's crusaders. And Robin Hood comes back to England and does what he does, and that's where that story comes from. So this is the truce, and this is sort of the reason why I bring this up is that this is sort of what we have today. Christians and Muslims are both in Jerusalem. It goes back to Saladin and Richard the Lionhearted. And then I'll just make one last point here is that Christians took Constantinople in 1204. That's the Fourth Crusade. Like I said, there are 9 altogether. You know, different historians give you different totals, but right around 9 is about the best number to sort of think about. They went for basically about 200 plus years. Christians going back and forth. Now, these things are going to add to the conflict between Christianity and Islam. That is going to have a lot to do with the Middle Ages. Okay, everybody? All right. Keep it up. keep writing, get it all down, review it, remember it, sort of think about it in totality. We'll all see you soon. Okay? All right. Good job. Aloha.